Hello, welcome to the first episode of Red, White, and Black, where we discuss when red states, white people, and Black lives intersect. I am your host, Pasha Morgan. I'm joined by your host, Luana Nelson Brown and Jalen Cavill. And this was actually not our original date. We wanted to start this podcast, but after the elections yesterday, we couldn't think of a better time but now to talk about all that is going on and being a Black life in a red state. So here we go. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Welcome. Let's talk about it. All right, where do we even start with this topic, right? At one point, Iowa was considered purple.
At one point, it was considered blue. Let's talk about that.
Right. At one point, we were considered blue. Now we're straight red.
Then we were considered a swing state.
And now we're straight red. Red.
Well, one of the reasons, and historically, one of the reasons that Iowa was the first in the nation and the whole caucus thing is because the makeup of Iowa was pretty similar to the makeup of the United States, with a similar white, Black, brown population to the actual United States. That being said, that is not the case. There are less than 4% of Black people in Iowa?
Something like that.
Yeah. So, and with redistricting, which they have done since the last election when Iowa almost went blue, or it was looking like Iowa was going to go blue in the federal election. After that, they did some redistricting. And what we have now is the elections we saw yesterday, which, I don't know, Jalen, you are the research man on elections specifically. So maybe you can tell us, or you can start us in on some of the seats that were won or lost that people didn't expect.
Sure. I mean, it was across the board. The elections were really awful for Iowa Democrats. It was a almost complete total sweep by the Republicans of almost every office in the state. Really, when we're talking about state level positions, of course, Kim Reynolds won re-election, but a lot of seats in that state executive office, which were held by Democrats for a long time, actually did flip. So Michael Fitzgerald, the state treasurer, who's been the state treasurer for a really, really long time, I think he was the longest acting serving state treasurer in the country, and was a Democrat. He lost his seat. As well as Tom Miller, the Iowa Attorney General, who was the longest serving Attorney General in the history of the United States, and a Democrat. He lost his seat. So when they talk about like a red wave, I think a lot of people were talking about that nationally. I don't think it really came to fruition nationally, but in the state of Iowa, I would say it did. The Democrats lost some legislative seats. They picked up a couple legislative seats. Sarah Trungariat won her Senate race, actually defeating the Senate president.
Isaiah Knox.
Jake Chapman, the GOP Senate president, lost his seat, as well as there were a couple pickups in Ankeny. Heather Matson won narrowly. But overall, I think Democrats lost, had a net negative of a few seats in the House.
3, I think. Was it 3?
Yeah. And I know, unfortunately, I mean, like Phyllis Thiede, we lost one Black legislator that we had in this state. Phyllis Thiede was a member of the Iowa Legislative Black Caucus. She was one of five Black legislators as of last year, but I'm going into this new session. Phyllis Thiede has lost her seat, and Ross Smith up in Waterloo did not run for re-election. But there are a few Black people who did win election. Like you mentioned, Isaiah Knox won his Senate seat in District 17 here in Des Moines, as well as what is her name? Mary in West Des Moines.
Mary Wells.
Mary
Wells
is the county treasurer, but the woman named Mary, I can't remember her last name, but she won a House seat in West Des Moines. She's a Black woman.
Okay.
But yeah, overall, like I said, it was almost a total Republican sweep in the state. All of the congressional seats are now controlled by Republicans. Cindy Axne was the only Democrat in Congress in Iowa. She lost her seat to Zach Nunn. And it looks like in the state government, in the statewide seats, the only Democrat to survive is going to be Rob Sand, who narrowly is
Narrowly
looking like
won.
he's going to win his election. They're still counting some votes in that, but yeah.
So let's talk about it. Why? Like, for real, let's talk about why. Okay, so we can start with Sydney Axne, right? Because Sydney Axne won. It was a Republican seat, and then she ran as a Democrat. What was it, 2018, and won her reelection then. So what happened?
First,
Like, let's talk about it, like, for real, because here's the thing, and this is to the people who are going to be watching this. The issue with this is we're really going to talk about this stuff because we understand that we bring these things up and we talk about this intersection and we talk about red states, but the thing is, when it comes to red states, there's a population of Black people that live in each and every one of those states. That is a small and almost ignored population on the national, because they already write our state off as red. So nobody is really paying attention to the actual politics that are happening within the states when it comes to Black and brown bodies, Black and brown lives. So let's talk about Sydney Axne, because that is a good example when we're talking about red states, white people, and Black lives intersect.
right.
What happened with Sydney Axne? Opinions, thoughts.
Let me start. Let me give a quick disclaimer, because when this is posted, we're gonna have people tune in simply because we are who we are. So people outside of Iowa may not know, but Jalen's a huge influencer. Pasha's a huge influencer. You are. And I'm
not, but I am a person who pays attention.
Right. And I know
a person who cares about this community.
Right. So. And so on this podcast, like, you're getting us for real. So outside of our close-knit circle, people may or may not know, our true thoughts. But on this podcast, that's what you're gonna get. And you will see, refreshments and whatnot. So when we start talking right now, it's going to be like for real. And this is why you want to tune in to this podcast. And her name is Mary Madison.
I remember
Madison, there we go.
Yeah.
I knew it too. I just couldn't come to the top. It wouldn't come to the
We're not going to forget a Black woman who has done what she did, Mary Madison. All right, so Cindy Axne. We're going to let Jalen kick that off because there's lots of thoughts around this, and let's just do it,
Sure. I mean, folks who know me know I have a lot of opinions on Cindy Axne, and have for some time now. Yeah, she was like Pasha said, our congresswoman. We all live here in Polk County, Des Moines, Iowa area. And so Cindy Axne has been our congresswoman for the past 4 years. She got elected in 2018, unseating David Young, then ran for re-election again against David Young in 2020. And then this time around, just narrowly lost her seat to Zach Nunn. It's expected. I expected Cindy Axne to lose. I'm not surprised one bit that Cindy Axne lost her seat. I think she ran a really terrible campaign with awful strategy and awful messaging. Her campaign was explicitly racist. The campaign that she ran this cycle, her campaign that she ran in 2020, she used a lot of very pro-police messaging, but it was also, right after the summer of 2020. So she was kind of trying to ride that line of talking about reform, accountability, that kind of stuff. For this cycle, she just swung completely to the right, to pro-police, fascism, racism, demonizing people of color, talking about rising crime, talking about law and order, locking people up, explicitly saying, I will never defund the police. She actually introduced 2 bills in the Congress in this past session, specifically for her to campaign on. She introduced these bills in the past session. One of them was called the Pathways to Policing Act, and one of them was called the Invest to Protect Act. Both of these bills calling for millions and millions of dollars in federal funding to be redirected to local police departments across the country. One of them was to train and to hire new police officers, the Pathway to Policing Act, and then the Invest to Protect Act was to just explicitly give funding, a bunch of money to all of these local police departments. She tried to frame it as small rural police departments.
Right.
The way the legislation was written, every single police department in the state of Iowa would have qualified for funding, including the Polk County Sheriff's Department, the largest law enforcement agency in the state, would have qualified for funding.
Which Kevin Schneider was gracious enough to let us know.
Yeah, and so I, of course, took issue with that. Many people in the Black community took issue with just her racist messaging that she was using, her ads that she was running, and the fact that this is explicitly the opposite of what people in our community, the people who she is supposed to be representing, are asking and calling for and saying that we need. We need more resources being put into our communities for mental health, for education, for healthcare, right? For different social services to actually help people in our community who do not have access to a lot of the resources that they need, and to actually help keep our communities safer and to stop crime. This is what we tried to communicate with her. I myself tried to have multiple meetings with her. I did have one successful, I guess, meeting with her where I was able to explain, how I felt and how people in our community felt and what we wanted to see from her. And I was ignored. She did not listen to me. She did not listen to other people who were advocating towards her. She turned her shoulder and said she does not want to listen to us, and completely turned us off. And the thing is we're the votes that she needed. We are
Absolutely
the votes to keep her seat. The seat, the 3rd congressional district, in the way it's drawn up, it has Polk County, which is Des Moines, the most populated county in the state, and then a bunch of rural southwest Iowa counties. The 2 elections that she won, 2018, 2020, Polk County was the only county she won in the entire district.
And it was enough to win.
Went red.
And she lost us with
the only way to
messaging.
win this seat, is to run up your numbers as high as you can in Polk County. You need to be speaking to the issues that resonate to people living in the urban core, living in Des Moines, Black and brown voters, people who would vote for you, should be in your base, but do not usually turn out. Rather than doing that, rather than speaking to the issues that we are facing in our communities, she turned her shoulder to us. She instead ran an explicitly racist campaign, pandering to white racist people in rural Iowa, and telling everyone that she loves the police way more than Zach Nunn does. She even at one point accused Zach Nunn of wanting to defund the police. And so, throughout this whole time, we're trying to tell her this is not what we want. This is not what we want to see from a congressperson. And me personally, I'm not going to vote for a congressperson running an explicitly racist campaign telling me that they're trying to give millions of dollars to police when that's the opposite of what our community needs.
Right, which brings us also to basically the subject of what we're talking about now and why this podcast and why this message, right? Because this is what happens. This is an issue when it comes to Black lives in red states, right? Because you are so outnumbered that the people who are supposed to represent you, like Sydney Axton, who in 2018 was talking to us like we were members of the community, in 2018 was talking to us like, yes, we don't expect anything less. Here's the thing, let's be clear. We don't expect anything less from white people living in America, right? We expect this because we've been taught this Barney Fife image of policing, right? We've been taught that there's this public service kind of representation of police. So we don't expect anything less. That being said, and to make it, because once this goes out and the people who are listening to this are going to be from places that are other than Iowa. So let's talk about a couple of the statistics in Iowa, right? So that they understand why this was such a big issue when you're talking to the brown and Black people of Iowa, particularly the Black people of Iowa. Because if you're talking to the Black people of Iowa, you're talking to people who are Black men locked up at an 11-to-1 rate, right? You're talking about 4% of the population, that's almost 30% of the incarcerated people, right? You're also talking about a population that has 25 to 1 the interactions with police, right? And this is the state that we live in. So you're talking about this, and you're talking about Black people in this state. So when you have a representative who is the only, like you pointed out, Jalen, the only Democratic representative, and the Democrats, the party of the people, right? They're the ones that are in our neighborhoods every 4 to 2 years, right? Talking about how they're the ones looking out for us. Particularly when it comes to Black communities, brown communities, immigrant communities. They're supposed to be the ones that have the sense. They're the ones that are supposed to be on our side. And in a red state, here we go. So we have a Democratic candidate in a red state, and one of her biggest advertising, and to be very honest, I should have had this queued up so that I could have shared this and we could have seen this commercial or heard it. And one of her biggest ads in her campaign is the fact that she not only co-sponsored the 2 bills that Jalen was speaking about, but that she will never defund the police. And her inline was what? I'm here to protect Iowans. But when we just talk about the statistics, then we understand that when she says that, what she's saying is, I'm here to protect white Iowans. And we hear the white, even if she doesn't say it out loud. And so the same votes, I used to tell, when I used to work in politics, I used to tell candidates, for every person that says something, think of it.
I'll say too, Pasha, on that ad that you just mentioned, when she's talking about how she'll never defund the police and talking about how much she supports the police. In that ad, there's a video of her with a Des Moines police officer walking, and people who live in Des Moines know that the Des Moines police officer is extremely racist and has an awful reputation within the Black community. As well as in that exact commercial, she called for increased border protection. She wanted to add more money to border patrol. So again, she's using racist dog whistles towards not only Black people but to Latino constituents.
And these are the Democrats. And these are the Democrats, which is why this is necessary, which is why this conversation is necessary. Because if these are the Democrats in your state, where is your representation? If you're not a white person in these states, where is your representation? When you have your Democrats and their campaign ads, or how they just did a statewide tour of police stations to show their support. And keep in mind the numbers, the facts that I've just given you, the numbers that I've just found are factual numbers. And they're numbers that they know as well. So, and if they don't, then again, we have an issue. Because again, we have a problem where an entire populace is being ignored because they don't think we're important enough. But we're important enough to make you lose an election. See how it worked? Because that's what I was saying. I used to tell people when I worked in politics for federal campaigns that if I have this opinion, think of me as 100,000 other people. So if you think about it as in state, think of me as 5 to 10,000 other people. So if I didn't vote for you, which I didn't, then there are 5 to 10,000 other people for every me that also did not vote for you. And that's how you lost an election that you thought you had in the bag.
Yep.
And she's going to lose by, I think, a little bit less than 2,000 votes, or about 2,000 votes. So very winnable.
Together.
Very winnable.
Yeah, together we know probably 2,000 people that, that
did not vote for her because specifically for this reason. I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. The people I have talked to, there is not one of them that said they did not vote for her because of what she voted, because of how she was voting for agriculture, because of how she was talking about the farmers that were in past West Des Moines. There's not small businesses. Not one person have I talked to that has not said that they specifically did not vote for her because of this, because of her sponsoring these 2 bills, and because of this ad and her adamantcy of her support of policing. Because as far as they're concerned, we are at odds. Policing and Black people have never been together. They have never been a source of duality. They have always been contentious because it was created from slave catchers and a slave catching model. So that being said, that when you know that, you say that. Now, in 2018, if this had been the same conversation, I probably wouldn't be having this conversation about Sydney Axton, to be very honest. However, after 2020, this is not something that you can now any longer say that you are ignorant to. People are very well aware of all of these things at this point. So 2 years later, for you that to be your campaign, you deserve everything you got as far as.
Yeah, I want to be super clear real quick too, just because I get this all the time on Twitter or everywhere else. People always coming at me, white liberals specifically coming at me. Oh, you want Zach Nunn to win? You voted for Zach Nunn. When I say
No,
I didn't vote for Cindy Axne, when Pasha says he didn't vote for Cindy Axne, when we say we know all these people that didn't vote for Cindy Axne, that don't mean that they checked the box for Zach Nunn.
absolutely
Okay,
not.
that just means that they either wrote somebody in or they just left it blank. I'm just
Yep.
letting people know we do not fuck like Black people don't fuck with Zach Nunn. We know that Zach Nunn is explicitly racist and harmful. We understand that, but we made a decision and realized that when you compare Zach Nunn and Cindy Axne, the choice is to just leave it blank or
The
write
choice is just to leave it blank.
They are both racist and harmful to our community.
They are true. And this vote, and see, this is another issue that comes up when you talk about elections in red states, is the Democrats or the liberals in these states who swear that they are on the side of people of color, and they are not, though, because in truth it is very internalized. So in the 2020 election, we had this, what was it, vote blue no matter who. And so in this issue you had, and this is specific, and I have to bring this up because this is an example of how things work, particularly when you live in a red state and you are a person of color, a Black person. So I had, you have this vote blue no matter who, while everybody is trying to push Pete Buttigieg to the forefront of this situation. And the issue is that people of South Bend, the Black people of South Bend, were saying, hey guys, he's racist as hell. Since he became the mayor of South Bend, interactions with police have increased 5 times. People are being locked up at a 3-time, Black people are being locked up at 3 times the rate, having 3 times the interactions with police. We're having stop and frisk. This is what's happened in the 5 years since he's been mayor of South Bend. Meanwhile, you have the white liberals of Iowa saying, vote blue no matter who. Pete Buttigieg's gay, so he must be open-minded, not paying attention to the fact that the Black people are saying, hey, he's racist, but because it protects them and they were scared of Trump, they're willing to put anybody but Trump in office, regardless of what downfall or the shit show that slides down on the people of color who live in their state. And that is an issue. These are all issues when it comes to this. There are so many, but this is a long show. So, and this is a long series. So we won't get into all of them this episode, but we will be getting into them as we go. So we're going to focus on the election, this one. And since we've already covered Cindy Axne and how and why she lost, let's talk about the next person on the list that would probably should have been the first person on the list. And that would be the incumbent Tom Miller, who had been in office since 1994. So he's going on 30 years in office and yet lost to a newcomer, not just a newcomer, but almost a QAnon follower. So far right is Breonna Bird, whose slogan was, give them the bird. Right. And yet somebody who is almost a staple of Iowa justice, as far as being the head of the AG office for 30 years, lost without and not even just a little bit. I'm pretty sure it wasn't even that close a race, was it?
No, I think it was a close race.
How close though? Is it more than 5 points? Because that's not close enough. No. Office for 5.
I don't know.
I mean, for 30 years.
It was less than 5 points.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm not real familiar with the ending points of that, but I do know that he did lose to her, and that now the people in the government of Iowa are all Republicans, not just Republicans, far, far right Republicans.
Yeah, so he lost by one point. It was less than around 20,000 votes he lost by.
Around 20,000 votes.
50% to 49%.
Same reason, ignoring a whole population of people that are telling you, hey, what you did right there, not okay. Not okay with our community. Your history, in the last 10 years has been not okay. Here are the changes we want to see you make, or here are the things we want you to do, and saying, thanks, no, that costs you votes. Because, and I have to be, no, forget it. This is our podcast. when you do things, you run all of victim services through your office. Like in other states, victim services money comes from the federal government. It goes to multiple offices, right? Like it goes to Department of Safety. One fund will go to the AG's office. One fund will go to the Department of Public Health. It's not like that in Iowa. In Iowa, all of those federal funds are funneled through the AG's office, as are state funds. So control of all of the resources for victim services funding as an industry come through that office. We had, like everybody else, had a rapid increase in crime. Black people in this state are, although we're less than 4% of the population, we make up 33% of victims of homicide. Like this is literal life and death for us. And then you decide to hire into your office a police officer who resigned in lieu of being terminated for punching a young Black man in the face while he was already on the ground and handcuffed, and 2 other officers were already on top of him. Not okay. What kind of message are you saying? That is a loud and clear message, which is very similar to Cindy Axney. You're sending a message to reach, a demographic, a white demographic, but that message also comes to us, right? And so this happens, and it's on top of a long record of not holding police accountable for brutality, as because the AG investigates incidents of police brutality. There's not been anyone held accountable over the last, I don't know how many years. There's an article out there about that, and then
it was since like 2004 that they had it.
Right.
A police officer for misconduct.
Right, exactly. That's a long time, especially as we're going through, the Black Lives Matter movement, not organizations, but the movement itself, which is all about accountability. And that's the stand you take. Like we see that, we hear that, we went directly to you, just like Cindy Axney, and said, don't do this, bad idea. You don't want to, if you actually care about Black victims in the state, then this is not the move you want to make. Did it anyway and said, thanks, but we're going to do this, So once again, this is a seat that was lost. And, again, you can't tell a whole lot of difference when it comes to Black lives in this state. Do we see a difference in the way that we're treated between red and blue? No, we don't. So that's why it looked the way it looked, Anyway, I'll shut up.
No, that's a good point. Don't shut up.
Yeah, you made great points. And he was also one of the people running explicitly racist ads. I don't know if people saw Tom Miller.
I did not. So can you tell us a little bit?
I mean, it was like your classic, like criminals are running loose in the streets and Tom Miller will lock them up, and it had all these statistics of like Tom Miller has locked up this many people for this many crimes, this way, just him bragging about, incarceration and the fact that he's going to lock up more criminals. Really what it's not even a new ad. It's something that his campaign just repurposed the same campaign ad that they had been running past elections, because he runs every 4 years for the past 40 years or whatever. But it's the same ad he had been running, but it was a racist, dog whistle ad, giving, remnants of like Willie Horton.
Mm-hmm. See that. And so whoever is giving these people advice, they're giving really shitty advice. It's like pander to white rural people in the state because that's how you win. That has nothing to do with people's lives, people's actual lives, And so I really want someone to sit in both of those offices that actually care about people's lives, about Black lives in particular. And you're telling me flat out, you're not that important, but I want your votes and I want, a good working relationship with you moving forward, but I'm still going to do this over here. You understand? And we're supposed to accept that. We're supposed to, accommodate that. And that is, why would we do that? Why would we do that? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest problems, right? One of the biggest problems is because it's very, the reason this is named and the reason we're talking about this, like we're talking about this, is because there is a difference between being a Black person in a state with a higher Black population and being a Black person in a state where almost 100% of the population is white. There is an entirely different field. There's an entirely different thing that goes on. It's organic in nature, right? So if you're in a red state, and we just talked about this, and like you were saying, Luana, with how he was pandering, when you're in a state, which is why it's red state, white people, right, and Black lives, because even when you're in a red state, when you have your blue kids, and they are talking to or trying to win, there's no room, right, for them to honestly even be where they need to be to reach the Black people in that state, because then they lose that vote of the white people, right? So there's this balancing act that has to take place because of the innate racism that is in America, the innate racism that people are growing up on, and that white people are, particularly because of their perspective in life, they are particularly what do you call it? When you're subject to, but I can't.
Socialized.
Yes, thank you. That's a good one. So when that is the case, then they don't have there's no perspective, right? They don't even think about the perspective of the Black people, because they're just trying to win the votes. And even if they are like, oh yeah, well this doesn't, yeah, I want to say this, and I'm meaning this as for all of you, but from their perspective, from how they think about it, how they present it, we hear that it's not from us. We understand that it's not necessarily disingenuous, but just without any actual perspective or understanding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, not Tom Wheeler or Sidney Axley, please don't mistake that, but I feel like in general with politicians, this is something that is something to talk about. It's something that affects us, because we do sit in this cross section of politicians speaking to the white people, and because we understand the basically indoctrination that happens with white people in this country in general. Not that every white person, do not send me any messages that talk about any white people, because you will get your feelings hurt. Now, that being said, we sit there and we understand that that is the case. And so even if it is not purposeful, we still end up with the short end of the stick, right? Because we sit here where even our politicians that say they are looking out for everybody end up having to deal with the majority. They have to pander, for all intents and purposes, to the majority. Otherwise, there's no chance in hell that they're winning. And then where are we at that point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. When what we're led to believe is that they're running on the issues, right? They're running on what matters to the lives of the people.
But it's actually
to win. It's actually to win. It's an industrial complex, right? And so what's disheartening is, voters, individual people, are looking to see themselves reflected. They're looking to see that their issue is going to be addressed, and they don't see it. And the reason they don't see it is because politicians, like you said, end up pandering to what they feel like will make them electable. And it has nothing to do with the lives of
and even when they don't, that's what I'm saying, even when they don't, say I'm a politician, right? I'm a white politician, right? And I go out there and I say every single thing that I'm talking about, right? And I say single thing that we know has to happen for all of us to have some inclusion and equity, right? And if I'm in a state that's 98% white, what are the chances of me getting elected?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I was 90% white. I'll push back on some of the stuff you said just because I think that that is the mindset the politicians have, but I don't think it's necessarily the truth or the reality that we live in. So I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think maybe that's what you were necessarily saying, that that's the
Right.
reality we live in, but that's how the politicians think, is that they need to pander to certain groups of people to win elections, when I don't think that that's actually true at all. I think that there is a way of speaking about the issues that affect people that can be broad, and that can relate to people living in urban and rural Iowa, people who are white, black, brown, indigenous. I think that there is a way that you can run campaigns that are rooted in actual issues that resonate with people and that can win people over. And you need to increase your voter turnout, right? They're constantly battling over this like hypothetical independent middle lane group of voters that they think is just going swinging back and forth every election, when that's not a real reality. The reality is that you just need to boost your numbers. If you look and see, it's like less than 50% of people are voting in these elections. You can win these elections if you boost turnout towards your side, and they're not doing that. But one of the main things that I think is that I know is causing this is that at the end of the day, both parties, Democrat and Republican, are beholden to corporate interest and capitalism.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, they're not going to truly represent us and fight for the things that we need, or even speak about the real root causes of the issues that we're facing, because that's not advantageous to them. Their power comes from their corporate donors. It comes from the capitalist class that they're actually truly running to represent. And so at the end of the day, what we regular Iowans, regular voters, regular people need doesn't really matter. Like,
Yep.
doesn't matter. Democrat and Republican, it's the same way.
Yep, exactly. And that's really the root of the issue, right? Is that who are you really representing? Who are you, us, me, Jalen, Pasha, or I won't name big corporations, or the corporations that donated the hundreds of thousands of dollars to your campaign so that you can run your ads. It's really their interest. And that's not just Iowa, that's all across the board. And so if we're going to tackle that, I don't even know
That's
where
a larger issue. That's the root cause though. At the end of the day, it's like we're not going to get anywhere when we're fighting over, two capitalist parties that neither one of them have our best interests at heart.
yeah.
One thing I do want to touch on, I guess, just related to election results. I know we talked about Cindy Axne and Tom Miller. Deidre DeJear, we had a Black woman run for governor here in the state of Iowa. She was one of, I think there were 5 Black women total running across the country. The United States has never had a Black woman governor. Still does not. I don't think none of them won on Tuesday, including Stacey Abrams in Georgia. And yeah, Deidre DeJear, who I did vote for. I personally thought was a good candidate. Obviously Kim Reynolds, we all know Kim Reynolds is awful, racist, done so much terrible things to the people of Iowa, to Black people specifically. She's a terrible governor, probably one of the worst in the entire country. And Deidre is the complete opposite of that. I thought she was a great candidate to run against her because Deidre is extremely intelligent, competent, super inspiring. Like anytime you see her speak, you just kind of get fired up. Like you want to fight for a better future, right? That's how I feel every time I've ever seen Deidre speak. I think she's an amazing candidate. She has an amazing way of relating to people, talking about issues in a way that resonates with people. All around, I think that Deidre DeJear is the best candidate that Iowa Democrats have run in a really long time. All that being said, I don't agree with Deidre on every issue. Like, I don't think that Deidre is near far enough on a lot of issues that I would like to see. But I do think she was a solid candidate, someone who deserved a lot of support. She deserved the political machine behind her to actually be boosting her campaign. She deserved to have all of the millionaire, billionaire donors who have opened up their pockets for all of the other white gubernatorial candidates that we've had throughout our history. And she didn't get that. and it's racism, it's misogynoir. It's because she's a Black woman. There were things happening in the primary, even before she actually won that nomination in the Democrats. People within the Iowa Democratic Party, powerful white people within the Iowa Democratic Party, who were raising the alarm, saying that we cannot have a Black woman as our nominee at the top of the ticket, because white Iowans are not ready to vote for that, and this will just drive down our vote all the way down the ticket. And Iowa is just too racist for us to have a Black woman as governor. So even though Deidre
No,
won,
you're too racist for us.
yeah, exactly. You're projecting. But even
Right.
though Deidre won the nomination, she did not get the support that you would typically see from a gubernatorial candidate, and it is because of what I just said: racist white people.
Right.
Who were projecting their own racism onto this imaginary class of voters that they came up with. And so instead of actually giving the resources that they needed and supporting her, they said, no, it's not worth it. And instead threw their money behind, Mike Franken or some of these other campaigns that they thought were more winnable in their eyes. And I think it's disgusting. And I think it hurt the party all the way down. When you're not supporting the top of the ticket and you're not putting your resources into the best candidate that we have, you are hurting every other candidate all the way down throughout the state. That is not how you build a party, by abandoning candidates.
Exactly that part. Go ahead,
Which
Pat.
is what I was just going to say, which is another stumbling block, another something about, and the reason I'm saying this is because this is the introductory, right, podcast. So in just talking about the election, look at all the things and all the specific bullet points that we have brought up that talk about the difference between being Black in a red state, that you don't have to deal with when you are Black in a state that has a higher Black population, right? And what you were saying, Jalen, is one of those things, which is the money, right? The money behind candidates. Now, let's go back and walk back with me, if you will, to 2018, when Deidre DeGier was running for the very first Black Secretary of State ever in the state of Iowa. And let's talk about how the IDP did her at that point. So this is 4 years ago. And I'm saying this because we sit here and who is head now? Is it Baganewski?
No, so the head of the Iowa Democratic Party is Ross Wilbur.
It's Ross Wilbur now, right? Because it was Sean and then it was Troy.
Sean was the chair of the Polk County Democrats.
Oh, Polk County. Okay, so it was Troy.
Troy was
always Troy. Okay, so and then we talked about when Troy first became head, he took over early 2019, late 2018, something like that. He took over head of the party, and then that didn't last very long. But he took over head of the party then, and his thing was diversity, right? Changing the party, which. Understand, for everybody who is not in Iowa, and for those who are, you are talking about the head of the Iowa Democratic Party, who is talking about how it is a need to have a more diverse party. This is the Democratic Party. This is not the Republican Party. This is the Democratic Party that is saying that even in the Democratic Party in Iowa, it is too white. It is not diverse enough in the Democratic Party. So then you have Deidre DeGier run as the first Secretary of State and gets, I want to say, less than $300,000, maybe. And that's pushing it hard, honestly. And now, mind you, if you have no idea, if politics is not your thing, billions go into politics. Billions with a B. There is 300,000 is a drop in the bucket. I worked for a federal presidential candidate that donated $25,000 for a spaghetti dinner.
Right.
For a spaghetti dinner. And so that is in Black Hawk County. So that is very important to know, because if you're talking about that, and then you're talking about an entire almost 2-year race for a candidate, in this case, Secretary of State, I think it was more like a year, but you're talking about this, you're talking about $25,000 for spaghetti dinner and $300,000 at the IDP, who charges, what is it, $150 a plate? How much is the plates for the IDP steak dinner?
I think it's
Steak fry.
150. Yeah, or steak dinner. I
Yeah.
think it's 150, I think.
That draws thousands of people, right? And this is a fundraising so that they have money to give to their candidates. Yet it is very clear that their candidates that they're giving money to are their white candidates that, because of their racist ideas, they feel like have a shot. So I do believe, when I looked at the budget report that Kim Reynolds had, that she received from her party a little over $3 million. A little over $3 million in the course of her campaign. Deidre DeGear, to run for governor as her party's ticket holder, it was $325,000 and some odd cents.
See,
it was
that
a
part.
10.
Yeah,
It was
Kim was pushing 4 mil, honestly.
Yeah, it was over $3 million. And you're right, I'm pretty sure it was like 3.8 something. So
She was,
4 million, while Deidre DeGear had a 10th.
Right.
Now, for those who don't really do politics, understand we are in a two-party system, right? So in our states most of the time, and in our federal government. So basically, the Republican Party decides who they're going to pick. The Democratic Party decides who they're going to pick. That's who they throw their money, their power, their networking, their connections, everything behind to get the vote out, to get people going. And in this case, the IDP, the other major candidate political party, gave a 10th to the person running for governor of the state. Now, again, for some background, the Democratic Party has spent the last 2 years whining, complaining, talking about how horrible Kim Reynolds is. And she is horrible. Understand, she is horrible. She is horrible for Black people. She is horrible for brown people. She is horrible for immigrants. She is horrible for farmers. She is horrible. She is defunding school systems. She is allowing CO2 pipelines, particularly in the southeast of Iowa, to use eminent domain to take people's land, to take people's farms, she refuses to allow any regulations or deregulations to corporate farming. So she is allowing that to go out of control. She is killing Medicare. All of these things are rural problems. All of these things are rural problems. Consolidated school districts, that is a rural problem. That is never going to happen in the city. It's never going to happen in the city, but it is going to happen in the rural part. Kim Reynolds is horrible for the city. She is horrible for the country. She is horrible for the Black people. She is horrible for white people. She is a horrible governor. And the Democrats have spent the last 2 years preaching that, talking about that, how horrible she is. They've created Facebook pages about it. They talk about it every time they go into session. They do all of this. And to defeat her,
right. And but
a 10th of the money.
Right. Don't forget
of the money.
While they're saying that, they are also simultaneously saying what you said a few minutes ago, that we need equity and we stand on equity and we need diversity in the party. So you put those two things together and then a 10th of the money. A 10th of the money. That is a clear act of violence toward Deidre. I'm just gonna, she will never say that.
She got less money than Franken did.
Right. No, that's what I was just about to say. So she was abandoned, right, by these big money donors, by the party leadership. But where you look at where the money was really directed, it was to where they said it was a more winnable race, which was Michael Franken running against Chuck Grassley. Admiral Michael Franken, who used to be in charge of AFRICOM. He was the general in charge of AFRICOM, which is the United States imperialist project over the entire continent of Africa. He's very proud of the fact that he would tell people he commanded all of the troops and all of the military bases on the entire continent of Africa. We're not fighting any wars in Africa. What's really going on with what he was doing in the continent of Africa and what they're continuing to do in the continent of Africa is special ops missions to overthrow governments, to to put in political leaders who will listen to the United States so that they can have colonial and imperial control over the continent of Africa, who they are competing with China right now to essentially control resources and political control over the continent. And that's what Michael Franken was in charge of. So when we talk about anti-Blackness and violence that's been done to Black people globally, Michael Franken has done more harm to Black people in this world than anyone else I could probably name right now. And not to mention the fact that also during his campaign, he was accused by his former campaign manager of sexually assaulting her, kissing her without her consent.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, sexually assaulting her because the Democrats tried to throw it under the rug and say that it was a Republican hit piece. The woman who accused him is a liberal, diehard Democrat, was not accusing him to try to smear him and have Republicans win. She legitimately was assaulted by him, and Democrats swept it under the rug because it was politically inconvenient for them and continued to fund his campaign and boost him over Deidre.
That sounds right.
It
sounds about right.
Over Deidre, who, as Jalen said earlier, there's a way to run a campaign that speaks to the issues, that speaks to all the people. And you may not agree with everything that candidate says, but they're running a clean campaign on the issues that speaks to. That was Deidre. That was the campaign she ran. And to not back her makes absolutely no sense. There's no.
It does make sense because as much as they talk about it, because it's Iowa. So as much as they talk about crap and as much as they try to say what they're trying to say or whatever, the truth of the matter is the reason they lean so heavily into Buxton, the reason they lean so heavily into the desegregation of schools is because everything they've done since then has been racist. Everything they've done since then has been to drive Black and brown people into the ground. You know what I found out yesterday because that's what I do. Me and my friends were talking about some random facts. And you know what I found out yesterday? Oregon, actually, it was illegal. Now, for Iowa, right? Iowa had one of the first integrated towns in America, right? Sometime in the 1800s in Buxton, right? America had the first integrated school system in America, one of the first, almost 100 years before Brown versus the Board of Education, right? Meanwhile, Oregon said it was illegal until 1926 or something like that for Black people to even live in the state, right? To even reside in the state, period. It started in the books on like 1850 at something like that. And it was on the books. Actually, it was on the books until 2002. We won't talk about that, but they enforced it until 1926. Right? Iowa has an almost 4% population of Black people, right? Oregon has almost 7%. How the hell it was illegal for Black people to live in your state until 1926, and you still have a higher population than the state of Iowa? One of the first integrated school systems and one of the first integrated towns in America. Everything they've done since then has been the exact opposite. Because they're still leaning on those things that happened almost 100 years ago, and they're leaning in their Iowa nice. Meanwhile, they're one of the most racist states in America, hands down. I have 34 states in America. Iowa, in its politics, in its policies, in its regulations, how it handles Black people, in its law enforcement, is one of the most racist states I've ever lived in. And I have lived in Texas and Alabama.
And many statistics will back that up as well, not just your personal experiences, but the statistics.
Right. Statistically, yes. Factually, yes. In my personal experience, also, yes.
Yeah, the disparities, and
the fact that we found out that a place that was illegal for Black people to live has somehow managed to increase its population of Black and brown people over the state of Iowa was and we were, mind you, this was just a random fact we discovered yesterday. This had nothing to do with this podcast. We were literally, I was looking it up and we were talking about it, and then we looked up the population. It's like 6.9%. And we thought, we thought Iowa, because we know Iowa's population. So then I thought, well, let's look up Oregon's population and see what the population is now, because in the 1860 census, of the 52,840 people that lived in Oregon, only 128 of them were Black. 100 1,028 people, not 1,000, not even 1,280 people. Out of almost 53,000 people in Oregon, less than 150 of them were Black. And then 150, 60 years later, now 7% of their population is Black. So I thought, I wonder, because I know Iowa's population. So if nothing else, that shows you a little bit about the backwards route that Iowa was taking, not to mention the fact that they're redistricting after their when was it in the presidential election? Davenport, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Council Bluff, and Des Moines were blue, right? Little blue islands in the middle of red. And then they did some redistricting. Did you see the election results this time?
Yeah.
Like?
Yeah. Another thing real quick about Oregon, aren't they one of the 5 states that had slavery on the ballot? There were 5 states that slavery was legal if you were incarcerated, something like that. Don't quote me.
Which is still the federal law, but yeah.
It's still the federal law because it's 13th Amendment.
And they were one of the 5 states that still had it as legal. And I think they overwhelmingly, voted to get rid of that. But to your point,
Louisiana said nah.
Yeah,
Louisiana said
it was the way it was written though. The person who actually wrote the ballot measure told people vote no because it was written incorrectly and it actually would have opened up loopholes to allow slavery.
I understand that. I do understand that. It's still hilariously funny that they're like, nah. But when I posted it, I didn't even post it so much that they posted that they said no, because that was not my point. The number one question on my point is, it is 2000. It is the year of our Lord, whatever Lord you believe in, 2022. Why in the hell is this even on the ballot? Why is it? Why in the hell is this still something that we're even talking about and discussing? And if we are, because it's America, why in the hell are then we have people actually standing up asking stupid ass questions like, is America racist? Yeah, bruh. Look around you, like everything. The fact that we're still talking about the first anything of Black people in 2022 answers your question.
Mm-hmm.
Answers your question. We've been here for a lot of years, and we've definitely been here at least since 1619. So the fact that we're talking over 400 years and we're still talking about the first of Black people doing anything answers your question about America.
Right.
Answer that question because it's getting on my nerves.
I would be curious to know, to your point, and maybe this is another topic for another day, but I would be curious to know how the disparities of Black residents in Oregon compared to the disparities in Black residents in Iowa.
Well, I have a few friends who live in Oregon, so maybe one day get a guest host.
Yeah, we'll have a guest host.
We'll have a guest on here and see.
Yeah, the maternal death rate, like what does that look like? We know it's like Black women are 6
crazy
times
here. 2 times the national average here.
Yeah, twice the national average. The homicide rate, I would like to know that, like what does that look like in Oregon? What does it look like in those 5 states that had, slavery on the ballot?
You know what? Why don't we talk about it? Why don't we talk about it next time? We'll wrap it up here because we've been here chatting it up for about an hour or so, but that might be something that we talk about the next time. We're from now on, we will probably be going live at the same time. We had an issue with our live right at the last minute here, so we didn't get the live version of this. But I would like to do this on a live at least a couple of times a month, because I think that it's important to not just us talk about it, but actually to get interactive with it so that we can see what other people in Iowa are thinking about, talking about, whether they have, and whether this is something that they've even considered, something they thought about, or different perspectives,
Yeah, 100%. So moving forward, you will see more of us on Red, White, Black, and we will, have the same type of energy that you saw today, our own opinions. Moving forward, interactive podcasts, some pre-recorded mini and interactive. And then some special podcasts for, people who follow us and, become part of our membership as well.
Part of our crew. Right now, we're gonna probably this will be posted